Welcome everyone aboard the Belle of Hot Springs as we start across Lake Hamilton. First of all, we'd like to remind you of the facilities we have on board. Downstairs to the second deck to the rear of the boat, you will find our snack bar, serving hot dogs, nachos, soft drinks, cocktails, and beers. For those of you over 21, popcorn, ice cream, anything manageable down there, even frozen individual pizzas if you get hungry. So second deck is where you'll find all that at the snack bar. Also on either side of the snack bar you will find the restrooms located on the second deck. Feel free to stroll around the top two decks as we start our cruise today, or on the front bow. The lower deck is not open at this time. We'll be pointing out many points of interest to you as we go around the lake today. We'll be pointing out many beautiful homes, many beautiful homes and mansions being built around the area. We won't point out every one, or we won't tell every name of every one, but we will point out some of the nicer ones. Some we will tell you the name of, some we won't because they don't want us to. But if you keep your eyes open as we go along the shoreline, looking back in these coves that we go along, we will see many beautiful homes. You notice these condominiums off to our left front here. This is South Shore condominiums. This is a timeshare condominium. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the timeshare concept. It's where you can buy 1 or 2 weeks of the year for your purchase. You keep that 1 or 2 years for the rest of your life, and it passes on to your children. And you have that keep every year and come on vacation here. And they also have exchanges where you can exchange and go elsewhere for your week. It's quite a popular mode here lately. You can see the newer ones that they've built right here, right on the shoreline. These are the newest condominiums that they've built right there. To our right here, this course of Highway 7 South Bridge. These were new bridges built in the early 90s. The old bridges were a 2-lane, very narrow bridge. They actually blew them up and dropped them in the water. It has to be over 35 foot deep. Wherever any of the old bridge is sitting under the water, it's required to be at least 35 foot deep. And through here, the main channel runs almost 100 foot, the main channel of our lake. So they had enough water underneath them to blow up and drop them underneath this bridge before they built the new one. They just blew up the old one, dynamited it, and down to the bottom it went.
There were 2 left in that box, and I almost brought them out. Oh, there were? Yeah, I was wrong side. Oh, I didn't see the lot. Yeah. Give her time.
As we approach to our left front, you'll see the brown home out on the point here. This is owned by the gentleman that has Oak Lawn Racetrack, Earl Sella. He also has another home right on the racetrack. This one's used principally by his children nowadays. Oak Lawn is our racing facility in town here. It is the 4th busiest track in the country when it runs from January through April. I believe their handle is just about averages $2 million a day, along with the simulcasting. So it is quite a busy track as far as money handled goes. And Mr. Sella owns this home here as well as the racetrack and the home on the racetrack, and they are out of the St. Louis area. Our race season does run, as I mentioned, from January through April. They do house up to 2,500 horses on the track, so it is quite busy and quite large, and they are expanding all the time and building more barns. Many trainers, all the big trainers come here, especially in the second week in April when they run the Arkansas Derby. All the big names come for the Arkansas Derby. Some of the people that do run here, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the country singer Reba McEntire. She has racehorses that are trained by Lynn Whiting here in Hot Springs and runs out of here.
They do.
The thing that made Hot Springs famous are the hot springs in the downtown area. If you go to the downtown area, you will see the hot springs. There are 47 hot springs in the downtown area. And 2 cold springs. The water that comes out of the mountain here actually has to be cooled down. It comes out at 147-degree temperature. And they actually have to cool it down before they can use it in the bath houses. It would be too hot and scald you, so they actually have to cool it down. The water that comes up from the center of the earth bubbles through the rocks in the national park downtown there. The water comes up is actually over 6,000 years old. As I said, it originates from the middle of the earth, and that's how it gets its heat coming up to the top. It comes to the top as a result of the hydrostatic. Nearly 1,300 pounds of minerals and solutions are contained in 1 million gallons of water that flow each day out of the park. They do have a collecting pool downtown. If you go downtown, you'll be able to taste it and drink it as well as feel it coming out of the water there. Hot Springs National Park is the smallest national park in the country. The national park is just the row where the bathhouses are, and about 3/4 of the way up the mountain behind is all the national park is. It is second most widely visited, ranking only behind the Grand Canyon in Arizona. We have a very lovely piece of property coming up in our left here. You'll notice he built a gazebo out in the first little island here as we go by. Then as we get a little longer, a little closer along towards his house here, this is the gentleman that convinced Tyson Foods to market the boneless chicken breast. And I guess you can see this is his reward for that. As we go by the house and his gazebo land here, just notice how much lakefront property he actually has. He has quite a bit. If you've ever built a seawall yourself, you'll know he has quite an expense wrapped up just in the seawall alone. I've been told, as we come up to the home of the water fountain here, with his home and the landscaping and all the land, that he has about $3.8 million tied up in it. Very lovely home.
Yeah, I know. He said that. He's not doing it. Whoever hires him.
First thing that you might notice if you go to the downtown National Park and you go into the Fordyce Visitors Center there, this is a bathhouse that your government spent $5.5 million refurbishing to a good condition. They do get free tours in the bathhouse. I highly recommend going and seeing it. It's got stained glass, marble on the floor, marble old tubs. It's quite beautiful and many old historic pictures. Well worth your time going through the Fordyce downtown. As I mentioned, your government spent $5.5 million to refurbish it, so take advantage of it. It is quite beautiful, and you can get a feel for the past. Of course, Hot Spring does have quite a checkered past. Gambling was done quite openly here from the early 1900s till 1968. In 1968, Governor Rockefeller at the time sent in the state police, and they smashed all the one-armed bandits up, and the blackjack tables were taken away, and the crap tables, and it ceased to be happening after that. However, it never was legal in Arkansas, even though it was done for over 60 years openly, but it was never legal, and they finally closed it down in 68. If you go to the downtown area and you look at the buildings on the west side of the street, opposite the bathhouses, you'll notice there's a second and third story on each one. Well, this is where all the old gambling was. The gambling halls were in the second story, and usually the bordellos were in the third story. the false fronts on them in order to cover this up, and many famous people came to our Hot Springs area during the gambling days. Of course, many gangsters came, like Al Capone came quite often. He used to like to come and stay at the Arlington Hotel, which is right across the street from one of the more famous gambling establishments at that time, known as the Southern Club. It was located now where the Wax Museum is. He would sit in his hotel room and take the same room every time, right out where he could see who goes in and out of the Southern Club, and as soon as he saw someone that he wanted to gamble with, he'd run down to the lobby, run across the street and gamble with them for a couple hours, come back out, and once again sit by the window till he saw somebody else he'd like to gamble with. Notorious gangsters used Hot Springs as a neutral site. They didn't bother each other when they came. This was their vacation spot. They could be mortal enemies, trying to shoot each other in the streets of Chicago one day, the next day be sitting at the poker table side by side peacefully, and the next day go home again and shoot at each other. But when in Hot Springs, it was a neutral area, and they never bothered each other. And the law, as many gangsters they had come to town at that time, like Floyd, many others, they never had any problem with them, and not one incident has ever been reported where they got in trouble over each other. You notice the home with the orange roof here, the gentleman built his home right out over the water here with the balcony. Actually, during the summer months, you'll see the kids actually jumping off the second deck there into the water. It's deep enough right off the balcony to jump from here. Notice the kind of light blue or grayish home with the black railing. Very lovely home with a swimming pool right here. That's a swimming pool where the gray is there. If you look down this cove, we can't get in there because it's too small for us to turn around in, but if you look down in here, you'll see some pretty homes back in here. Down the back of the bay here, you can see a large O on the home. This is the Osborne, Jennings Osborne out of Little Rock, Arkansas. He owns a pharmaceutical company. Is well lit up at night. Very lit up. He even has a helicopter pad here at his home. So as I mentioned, he has a pharmaceutical company out of Little Rock, Arkansas. You might have heard him from the national news. He's a gentleman in Little Rock that did the 2 million Christmas bulbs on his home over there and then increased it, I think, to 4 million. And finally they got a court order to make his neighbors decided it was too much of a bother with all the traffic going by to see it. Well, this is the gentleman, that had the same gentleman here. And another very lovely home was built in 1996 here in Chesed to our left, along with a swimming pool bound by the lake. Very lovely home. The discovery of this area is credited to Hernando de Soto. He was the famous Spanish explorer who was said to have gone through the area in 1541. This was even before the Mayflower at Plymouth Rock, so you can see that it was a long time ago. De Soto liked the area so much he never left. Him and his men, by the time they got to Hot Springs, most of them were ill or sick. Most of their blades were dull or broken from hacking through the dense vegetation to get this far. Journals that have been found of his say they visited the hot and brackish water and stayed about a week. As I mentioned, many of his men perished right here in Hot Springs. DeSoto himself died on the Louisiana-Arkansas border. He was rather unusual. Queen Isabella really was fond of him, and he was given the largest fleet ever to leave Spain. He had over 500 horses alone on his expedition when he left. She was quite fond of him, and that's how he secured such a large expedition. But as I mentioned, he died here. If you look back to our left, this is a development of the beautiful homes being built back in here, known as Driftwood Point. Because of the depth of the water, won't be back in there, but if you look, you'll see some very lovely homes that have been built back in this area. We have DeSoto to thank for the famous suey pig. The Razorbacks were a main food supply on the ships for the men. Of course, when the men came to Hot Springs and got sick, the pig started running wild in the woods and adapted quite well to the heavy forest around the area. Started multiplying and breeding, and still doing quite well in most of southern Arkansas today.
Yeah.
In 1803, when the Louisiana Purchase was made by the United States, they bought this portion of the country from France. The entire area here was part of the land included in the price of 1803. As we approach this next point on our left, you'll notice there are no homes here. There is a cottage, a little cottage and then there is a banquet hall. There isn't actually a home on this land. It is rented out by mostly Christian civic organizations. Come and spend the night here. As I mentioned, it doesn't have really any sleeping facilities, just a large kitchen and cooking facilities in the building you see here. I like the way, though, they particularly made their own man-made pool here out of the lake. They cemented in around, as you'll see as we come by, the water on the lake to make their own little natural pool. In the early 90s, this lot was put up for sale. If you wanted to buy this little island, they were asking just short of $1 million for it. You see the mountains to our right front. Very pretty mountains. Music Mountain, and beside that is West Mountain, and behind that is Sugarloaf Mountain. If you go to the downtown area and go to Winnington Avenue, you can drive up on top of West Mountain. There is a very beautiful drive up on top where you can look over the town and the mountains up there. There's a big National Park sign, brown and yellow sign, that'll say West Mountain with the arrow. Just follow that up off of Winnington Avenue, and you can go up on top of West Mountain and see around. It is quite pretty. There are hiking trails all throughout the mountains here if you like to hike in the woods. You can even go to where the mountain tower is, and there's several trails off of that that are very easy to get to in the downtown area. To get to the mountain tower, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, you just go to the Arlington Hotel and take the street to the right there all the way up to the top of the mountain. That is also the mountain that the National Park is located on. That is three-quarters of the way up is the National Park. The last quarter is privately owned, and thus the city built a $1.5 million tower that you can go up and look around the area. I'm going to show you that in just a minute when it comes into view. There are hiking trails all throughout these mountains in the area here if you'd like to do that. off to our right to the back of the bay here, you can see the mountain tower up there standing above the trees now. Off to the right to the back of that bay across here. You can see something like, I think, 800,000 acres when you go up there. You can see for quite a while. It's very pretty to go up there. It was built, as I said, by the city of Hot Springs. I think it was about $1.5 million when they built it. In the old days, they used to have a wooden tower that sat there that wasn't quite as high. The difference was the wooden tower just had steps, and you had to climb all the steps all the way up. Now, of course, today you get to take an elevator.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
If you look ahead of us to our left, you'll see several islands out in the lake here. These are owned by Arkansas Power and Light. They're the company that developed the lake. So these are owned by them, so they will never be sold or built upon because of that. So you have, probably 12, 15 islands on this lake, such as this spread throughout the lake. Actually, the land that we left from at the Belle Landing, Long Island, is an island too. However, there are homes all built on that island.
It could be.
Of course, we have many different Indian tribes that ran through the area here back in the old days when DeSoto came and so forth. One of the more peaceful, loving Indians were the Caddo Indians. They weren't a warlike tribe. They actually built their homes out of thatched roofs and were farming Indians. Did a lot of farming. One of the more fierce ones was the Osage Indians. They were a very small tribe, but they won most of the battles they were in. The reason for this was because they discovered the rock Nabaculite, which is a rock that's found just through the 15-mile radius through Hot Springs here. It's the finest sharpening stone known to mankind, and they could be outnumbered something like 4 to 1 in a battle and still win just because of their weapons were so much superior to their foes. The rock Nabaculite was the first thing that brought white man into the area. They came in to mine this Nabaculite. As I mentioned, it was found only in this 15-20-mile radius through Hot Springs here. Before the laser was invented, all of the surgical instruments, such as scalpels and so forth, were sharpened on the Nabaculite stone. So you can see it was an excellent stone for sharpening your knives and blades. You can purchase Nabaculite and take home with you in the gift store when we get back. They do have some for sale there. And it still is the finest whetstone known to mankind today, even to this point. They have in recent years discovered a tiny little vein in Japan of Nabaculite. However, this is the only place in the world that is still mined. Another Indian tribe that was in the area was the Washita Indians and also the Creek Indians. They had a very large Indian war right on the water that we're on through this area now, between here and ahead of us on the bridge. They had a strong dislike for each other. In fact, I guess probably the Creek Indians didn't do real well because they lost the battle. The Washita Indians are still around. However, there are no Creeks left known today. I think they have become an extinct tribe. Interestingly enough, the Indians also used this area as a natural area like the gangsters did. Back before the springs were covered up in the downtown area, they were all open and there was always a mist from the hot water, so the entire downtown area was covered in a mist or a fog all the time. The Indians believed that it was the Great Spirit breathing on the water that caused this mist. Thus it had magical curing properties. They would bring their sick and camp for weeks, have them drink this magic water, hoping to cure a variety of ills. One tribe would not bother another. all the way through, even far coming from Oklahoma through the area. As long as they were bringing their sick with them, they could camp peacefully alongside and leave peacefully and never have any problem. The very large home that you see to our left here is that of Dr. McFarland out of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He is the eye doctor that invented the no-stitch eye surgery. I've been told that his wife went to Italy to pick up all the inside fixtures and plumbings for the house. Very lovely home. Notice how many unusual angles it has. It's one of the few homes the architect design has with so many different non-90-degree angles in it. I'd like to know a little bit about the fishing in the lake. This lake does contain largemouth bass, striped bass, Kentucky bass, black bass, hybrid bass, silver bass, trout, crappie, walleye, as well as a variety of panfish and catfish. We do have a fish hatchery located on this lake that helps keep the lake well stocked. They raise over 5 million small, largemouth bass a year in this hatchery and then ship them throughout the United States. So they keep this lake very well stocked with this. The state record striped bass did come out of this lake right here that we're on. I believe it was around 42 pounds. The development that you see to our left front, known as Stonegate Shores. The lots in this area can sell from anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for the lot. Many nice homes being built on this, as you can see. The lake we're on now, Lake Hamilton, was built by Arkansas Power and Light. This is the oldest man-made lake in the country. They've started construction of this lake in the 1920s. The board finally finished one of the dams about the mid-20s and actually got everything all flooded and done in the 1932 time the last dam was done. C. Hamilton Moses, which this lake is named after, was Arkansas Power and Light's general counsel. He was a Little Rock attorney that also owned much of the land around the area here, and he donated quite a bit of land to the Arkansas Power Light so they could form this lake. So they named the lake after him. Harvey Couch was another gentleman that was very instrumental in getting it passed through the legislature so they could go ahead and dam it up. And Lake Catherine is named after his daughter. Lake Catherine is the lake on the other side, below this one on the other side of the dam. Ahead of us, if you keep going to the very end of the lake, you run into Blakely Dam. That is the dam between Lake Ouachita and this lake. The dam that's on the other end of this lake is Carpenter Dam. It was named after a gentleman that was just an old riverman. He never had any formal education or anything. He was just spending his whole life on rivers and lakes, and he knew about the flow of water. And he suggested before the Corps of Engineers came in and did their measurements where the 3 dams should be built on this lake. When the Corps of Engineers came in and did all their transit shooting and everything with their accurate instruments, they found out he was just inches off on each dam. They were so impressed that he could be that accurate without any instruments that they named it after him. They are both hydroelectric dams that produce 56,000 kilowatts of power on the Blakely, and I believe it's 42,000 kilowatts on the Carpenter Dam. So they have, give you an idea, that's enough to light up New York City. So quite a bit of power is produced out of these 2 dams. Another set of condominiums to our left that you see here. These are known as Harbor South condominiums. Then you see the 70 bridge. As I mentioned, the lake does continue on for several more miles up through this area. It does start getting thinner and thinner, more like a river than a lake really towards the closer you get to the dam up there. If you ever go up to Blakely Dam, the water is just crystal clear all the way about the mile from the dam down. It's just crystal springs clear. Every afternoon they'll generate, sound an alarm if you're in the water, get out quickly, because 38-degree water comes from the bottom of Lake Washita into this one, and it'll actually numb you so you can't even swim, it's so cold. The home that you see to our left front. The waterfall is out of Jim Cozen, the Greystone Estate. They have Wendy's and Pizza Inn chains throughout the country. This also might be a good time to get up, stretch your legs, go down and get something cold to drink or a bag of popcorn, something to eat. In any case, we'll be back with you in just a few minutes. landscape homes. We go along this area, the next 4 homes, they'll have pools right here between their house and the lake, you might notice. Very lovely homes. And ahead of us, the condominiums that you'll see coming up will be going to Scully Point condominiums. Back in the old days, if we go back in history, a little bit of Hot Springs. First thing, the early days that brought people to the Hot Springs, of course, were the springs in the downtown area. In the early days, they would just pitch tents around the Hot Springs and camp there. Then some people figured out that this was a very good thing, and they started setting up and trying to buy the land for themselves. However, in the 1800s, the president was informed by his advisors of this, and they said they thought it would be quite beneficial to keep it open to the public, not to let one individual buy up the land as they were trying to do and start charging to use the springs. The problem was there were no national parks at that time. They had no way going through Congress to get it established for the public. In fact, they didn't even have reservations at that time. In 1832, the president declared Hot Springs a reservation. This was the first reservation. There weren't even any Indian reservations at that time. This was the first reservation in the United States in 1832. It stayed a reservation until 1921 when they did then have the national park system set up, and it was made into a national park from a reservation in 1921. In 1820, the first inn was built in the downtown area for the people to stay in. In 1830, the first bathhouse was built for them to use. The reservation that the government set up covered a 4 square mile area in the downtown vicinity. In 1836, the first stage line came from Little Rock to Hot Springs. At that time, the roads were very bad. Going over the mountains, it was quite rough and bumpy, and people were, by all reports, were quite exhausted from the ride by the time they got here. And of course, they found the hot springs to soak in quite beneficial after the hard ride. Eventually, trains were built into the area and came directly from the Chicago area, built down into Hot Springs, and they had large amounts of people coming from the area for the springs for this. By 1873, there were 2,400 people in Hot Springs. There were 12 hotels. In 1875 was the first year the railroad came to town. If you go to the Fordyce and look at the old pictures, you'll see some of the old pictures of these type of things. They also had the mule trains pulling the supply wagons in the downtown area. The streets were quite crowded. In the early day, the sewage system actually ran through the middle of the town and in the downtown area. And of course, today it runs underneath the city streets. In 1882, the construction of the Army-Navy Hospital was built. They had the best cure rate per patient in the world in this hospital at that time. So many people came from the many big city areas to come to the hospital to use it under this very good success ratio that they had. As I mentioned, it was in 1916 that the reservation was turned to a national park by Woodrow Wilson. In the old days, we had many famous people visit the area. Dizzy Dean, the old pitcher, was here quite often. Babe Ruth, Jesse James, Al Capone, as I mentioned earlier. Douglas Fairbanks, Lillian Russell, Herbert Hoover, Will Rogers, Andrew Carnegie, William Jennings Bryan, Jack Dempsey, and Kate Smith, just to name a few. Of course, probably nowadays the most famous person in Hot Springs was President Bill Clinton. He went through all of his schooling in Hot Springs from elementary school and graduated from Hot Springs High School. In 1804, the first Scottish scientist came to the Springs to study them, a gentleman by the name of Dunbar. Upon coming in here, he found an open log cabin that was set up, made of split wood, and erected by the people that were using the Springs for the health purposes. Interesting to note that Henry Rector, the governor at the time, moved the state capitol to the bathhouses in 1862 to prevent the Union troops from reaching them from Little Rock. If you go to the downtown springs today, you'll find that most of the springs have been covered up with big green boxes to protect them from pollution. In the old days, all 47 of them were open, and as I mentioned, the constant steam was coming off them covering the downtown area. Once again, through this area, you see some very lovely landscape homes here in the point. You might like to know a little bit about the boat upon which you're riding. Belle of Hot Springs was built by the Dubuque Boat Boiler Company in Dubuque, Iowa in May of 1961. The hull was constructed in the factory in Dubuque. It was then cut into quarters, shipped by rail to the shores of Lake Okoboji in northwest Iowa. There, the hull was reassembled, the superstructure was built on, and it was launched as the SS Empress in May of 1961. The Empress plied the waters of Lake Okoboji until September of 1983. Bob Burrow had the boat built for his family, and his family has continued to run it to this day. It ran for 23 years on Lake Okoboji. Then in the fall of 1983, it was pulled out of the lake. It was cut into quarters. The top two decks were cut off. then cut down the middle. The bottom 2 decks were cut down the middle. It was loaded onto 5 semis and shipped to Hot Springs by a trucking firm. There's quite a tale that goes with this. The gentleman that had the contract to haul the boat also hauled boats for the Navy. He was one of the only 2 in the country that had a rig big enough to carry a load such as this. He was supposed to pick up the boat's pieces by September of '83 and have the boat delivered to Hot Springs in October. However, this was about the time that the grenade invasion was being planned, and he knew about it weeks in advance. Only those immediately inside the White House knew it other than him, but he had to haul gunboats for the Navy from San Diego, California, and Seattle, Washington to Key West, Florida. To do this, he had to use the trailers that were to haul this boat. He kept giving us excuses why he couldn't make it. His rig broke down, his transmission would go out, he'd have flat tires. Finally, after several weeks, he said, wait a second, that's enough excuses, what's going on here? Well, it just so happened the very next day is when the invasion was to take place, so he went ahead and told us that we were going to invade a little island country known as Grenada. And if you'll think back that time, nobody had ever heard of the little island of Grenada. So we thought he was quite mad. Maybe the stress was getting to him. But sure enough, the next day it did happen. The sad part about the story is President Reagan found out that the Cuban troops were to more than double the next day, so he moved up the invasion by 24 hours, and the gunboats that he hauled all the way down there were never even used in the invasion. Finally, he came and picked up the boat in Iowa. If he could have come straight from Iowa through Missouri to Hot Springs, it would have been a 750-mile journey. But because of the size of the load and the height, he had to go out to Wyoming, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas. And a 750-mile run became a 3,000-mile one. The hull of the boat goes down the water 2.5 feet. The props are another 3.5. It's slowly loaded. We need about 7 feet of water which to run. It's powered by 2 GMC diesels, 671 variety. Then you got 2 36-inch screws. Top cruising speed is 15 miles an hour, and now we're going at approximately that speed. The Belle was built to carry 400 passengers. The condominiums that you see off to our left are known as point condominiums. And if you look ahead of us, I'm sure you can figure out how they came up with this name. One of the most famous early residents to come to the area was Jesse and Frank James. They came to Hot Springs quite often because their mother lived here in town. They used to come and visit her quite often. Many places have claimed to have Frank and Jesse robbed them, but there aren't very many that are actually documented by the law enforcement. This is one of the few that actually was documented by the law enforcement. The sheriff at the time, as I mentioned, they came often, and he recognized their horses in town so often. And right along the area that we're going now, you must remember before they flooded this lake, this was the Washita River that ran out in the middle here. There wasn't any lake like this, just the river. And this is where the old Hot Springs stage line ran, right alongside the river here, continued on up till Malvern, Arkansas. And this is where Frank and Jesse got one of their earliest starts in crime. And one of the first things that they robbed was the Hot Springs stage line. At the time, Jesse was only 18 years old. And the sheriff just happened to be going by in the distance about a mile away, and he could see the horses and recognize them as their horses. That's how they were able to identify it was them. Being young and one of their first capers, they were quite nervous after they got the haul, and they got quite lucky. The stage line was carrying gold coins for payroll for a timber company in Mississippi, and was on the way for the payroll to the timber company when they robbed it. So they knew they couldn't outrun the sheriff with it, so they went to a mountain ahead of us known as Jack Mountain. They buried all the coins and the money, figuring they'd return in several months and dig it up. Several months later, they did come back and dig it up. But one oak tree kind of looked like another oak tree, and they never did find it. The reason I know all this is because Frank, after Jesse was killed, Frank never did any jail time. In fact, they never even had a trial for him because they couldn't ever get enough evidence against him. He came back and lived in this area. He was a sharpshooter in a carnival that traveled a 4-county area through here. He was quite fond of bottling in his later years, and doing his little drinking buddies, he told them many of these stories, and they were written down and passed on, and that's how we know what happened on this early repairs here through the area of the Hot Springs stage line. As we come up to this next point here, this was one old piece of property from the tan house on. The original family cottage was the white one with the green roof. Then the children remodeled the tan one and stayed in it. But then there was a caretaker's cottage on the backside. In the early 90s, this point here was offered for about $1.2 million. Since then, they have sold a portion of it off, and the very lovely home was built out on the point here.
Level it until we build. Oh, it's just a little cabin. Oh, yeah, but we're on the lake. Now that we would use his cabin, you go further out on Highway 7. Go back to this weird, I mean, it's weird, wild. The road is not paved. Yeah, the little A-frame. I mean, there's a bunch of them on the street, but this was a little A-frame. You have to come up, when we come up, we always woodpeckers would make holes and stuff, and we patched the holes and fixed the steps. Yeah.
While you're in Hot Springs, you may want to take in some of our many other attractions. As I mentioned earlier, the Mountain Tower that I showed you, you can go up and see a panoramic view of Hot Springs, look over the National Forest. And there's the Mid-American Museum, where you can put your imagination to use and let it soar. This is a touch and view museum, where you can pull, twist, squeeze, and launch many fantastic devices. All ages enjoy the museum. I highly recommend it to everyone. Everyone enjoys it, no matter what your age. Downtown, of course, we have the famous Bathhouse Row and the Hot Springs National Park Visitor Center. Be sure you go to the Fordyce Bathhouse and tour it. It is quite a sight down there to see. While you're here, you may want to take one of our famous baths. There are several bathhouses still functioning in the Bathhouse Row downtown there. We also have the Wax Museum, Tiny Town, Alligator Farm, IQ Zoo, Dryden Pottery, where you can see pottery being made, as well as the duck tours that go throughout the downtown area. We do hope that you enjoy our many attractions and enjoy Hot Springs with your stay while you're here. Off to our left front here, you'll see a large brick patio area. You really can't see the mansion with the trees in behind, but this is the Scott family. They own the Majestic and Arlington hotels in the downtown area. And the gray condominiums are known as North Shore. About the lake, I want you to ride in. Lake Hamilton is 14.5 miles long, has 750 miles of shoreline, has about 7,800 acres of water. The deepest spot is 200 foot. Most of the main channel average is over 100 foot. We are in one of the main channels here as we go through the little lake here right now. Lake Washita, which is the lake on the other side of the dam that joins this one, is an even larger lake. It's over 1,000 miles of shoreline. It's about 40 miles long. It is one of the 3 natural, pure, cleanest lakes in the country. All the skin diving is done up in that lake, as well as the sailing, because it's a north-south lake, so they get the wind. Hamilton's an east-west lake, so we don't get as much wind, so there's very little sailing done on this lake. Multicolored awnings that you see to our left is known as Sunbay. This is a motel and a timeshare kind of in combination together. The large building that you see just across the causeway here is a Clarion Resort Hotel over there. Notice the home there with all the rock in his house, as well as all of his landing area and his wall is all built out of the natural stone.
Well, so now it's back up and they got a bid on how much it's going to cost. Anyway, so really, that wants to bother my next hours, but he did contact us and we never heard from him. It's an empty lot. Yeah, well, we got a lot of the one that's very cool that we got, yeah, that's the thing. Jeff wants to buy the house next to us for 2 years, and then that way he always was comfortable with us.
As we come up to this next point here, you might notice the stairs that lead down the point here. You'll notice as we go by, they continue right on under the water. The reason for this is the spot when the Corps of Engineers came and started building this lake. This was their main entrance, where they brought all their surveying equipment, everything every day. They got tired of going up and down. At that time it was no water here, just a drop off. And they got tired of hopping up and down the cliff, so they poured this cement. It continues on into the water, as you can see, about 2 or 3 foot down, and this is where they entered the lake every day when they were building the lake. The condominiums that you see here are known as Hamilton Point. They run in the $250,000 to $275,000 area. You'll notice the one right on the point here, the new building that's facing us. This was all burnt about 1992, I think it was. It burned, this unit clear to the ground. Gentleman out here on the 4th of July weekend was grilling on the patio that you see right here, and it caught fire and burned the entire complex on the end here to the ground. So it's just recently been rebuilt. Then you can see the bridge for Highway 7 South again. Ahead of us is the home port for the Belle of Hot Springs. Would like to mention that we do have a dinner cruise going out 7 nights a week. If you are ever in the area and want to do something quite unusual, join us for dinner and dancing under the moonlight. It's quite an enjoyable cruise. Everybody has a lot of good time on it. So if you're ever in the area or you ever have a special occasion, be sure to come and join us on this. We also cater to many different parties, family reunions, class reunions, army reunions, wedding receptions. Just about any kind of party at all, we do cater to them. We do have group rates. Feel free to call us or inquire at the office. They'll be happy to quote them to you. Also, if you're looking for a good home-cooked meal, Gilligan's right underneath the bill has very good omelets and breakfast as well as lunch going on there. I highly recommend it there. They're very good. Well, thank you all for going with us today. You've got to ask that one, please have a seat and remain seated until after we get landed here. We do hope that you have enjoyed your cruise. If you have, please tell your friends about it. Come back and see us again sometime. If you haven't enjoyed your cruise, however, please don't tell your friends about it. In fact, don't tell anyone. Tell me as you're getting off, I'll do everything I can to rectify the problem. Once again, thank you for coming and drive safely on your way home.
But then that would be the purpose of having the garage there. Oh yeah, but the garage, yeah. And it's a cute little house. I mean, it's very nicely laid out. And he's got, I used to love to go to this kitchen. He had hummingbird feeders all along the side of the garage. And I just sit there and just, oh no. He probably had 20 feeders. They just go. It's like ransom station. Our water's going to be hot when we get there. About that. very hungry kind of girl.
You know those many little boys in the band that
Hey, yeah, you betcha.
we had a 5-foot long Texas
I have it.
the strings from the yard tore down by the outside of our house. So we saw it in one part of that. There was a
How's your neighbor's house coming?
It's going to be done. They sold it.
Wow. They were fast. Well, Terry said